What if the thing standing between you and getting your book out into the world isn't your message or your writing, but just knowing where to start and who to ask? That was the case with my new friend from PodMatch, Kirsten Telan. Kirsten is a blogger and the author of A Tale of Two Dogs, a children's book that explores friendship, kindness, and how our differences make us stronger and better together. Ooh, I love that so much. Kirsten blogs for women, and when she wanted to publish a children's book, she asked Siri, of all things, how to do it, and then almost talked herself out of the whole thing before it even began. But God had other plans. Kirsten's sharing how she pushed through her fear to get her book published, how the kindness of strangers helped her with the right connections, and how she's now using PodMatch to get her message in front of audience she never could have reached on her own. You're in for a treat today, so let's get to it. Welcome, Kirsten, to Book Marketing Mania. I am so thrilled you're here today.
Thank you, Kim, so much. Love that I have been invited on your podcast. So thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, this is so fun. So tell us, Kirsten, about your book, A Tale of Two Dogs, and who you wrote it for and who it's reaching and what it's about.
A Tale of Two Dogs is about our true live dogs here in Orlando, Florida. They are 5 years old now, but we brought our little Mochi, the Shiba Inu, home, along with Murphy, our pug. And after about 8 or 9 months, this was during COVID, so we had a lot of time, but I started observing them and I noticed that they were taking on each other's habits.
Uh-huh.
And I sat down with college ruled notebook and a pen, and I sat and I wrote a rhyme about these two dogs. And they're very different breeds. They look completely different. One is from Japan, the Shiba. He was born and bred in Japan, and the pug, Murphy, our pug, born and bred in China. So I started thinking different countries, different breeds, different characteristics, and how they've taken on each other's habits and how doing so has made them better and stronger. Um, and I thought, this is a lesson for humanity as well.
Mhm.
Just trying to promote empathy through this and kindness. And I've been a blogger. I started in 2017, and my blog is called The Confetti Effect.
Mhm.
It's spreading kindness like confetti. So, what's really interesting is that's where I started. That was my mantra. That was my blog. And then this Tale of Two Dogs little children's book for 3 to 7 year olds is almost the vehicle to get out there and get into schools. I just did a school visit this morning.
Oh, yay.
I have been having so much fun. It's a whole ecosystem, God orchestrated. Of course, I had a lot of grit and grace behind the scenes, but I had no idea that this is where this book would lead me into the schools. All of these schools let me take my dogs with me, Mochi and Murphy,
Oh.
the tales of the book
Uh-huh.
with me. It's a great show and tell. And today I met with 8 classes of pre-K and kindergartners. And my goal for writing this book is to entertain and to educate on all the fruit of the spirit and to encourage and to inspire. So kids are interactive and fun. And I'll start off by saying things like, who has shared a toy today? What is it like to be kind? Have you had a new school friend come in mid-year? And everybody that, yes, yes, we had Avery come in, we've had Johnny come in. What does that mean? What did you have to do? And then they share all the things that they're doing, how they're being kind, they're um, showing them around the school, they're introducing them to their friends, they're having them over for play dates. And then I talk about what it's like to be gentle and to use your soft voices inside. What is it like to have self control? And all of them, the answers are right on, they're on point. They say things like today, they said, to not yell and not to grab a yellow marker out of my friend's hand when I want the purple one instead of the yellow one, not to grab stickers, being patient, sitting calmly. And when you get up, you line up to go out to lunch. You're not yelling or grabbing a friend or cutting in front of anybody. So we talk about all the fruit. They give their examples. And then I read my story. And then I ask them if they can tell me how my dogs have showed kindness and what conflict there was or struggle and what they need
Mhm.
to work through. And then we talk about things that can be scary and fearful that stop us from doing things, growth mindset and things like that, getting out of your comfort zones. Um, but anyway, this is what I do as I go into the schools and it teaches them empathy.
Mhm.
I think it also promotes critical thinking and problem solving.
Uh-huh.
Always a little conflict in the book, and it helps build self confidence for the real world.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so true. So your blog, is that for adults? But then you did a children's book around a specific topic?
Yes, and that's why the podcasting world has been so wonderful for me because
Uh-huh.
that Confetti Effect blog, I think I've been writing articles now for about 8 or 9 years.
Uh-huh.
It's also on my website too, but I started off it was more of a self-help, Kim. It was like talking about boundaries, forgiveness, empty nesting, reinventing yourself. And about 4 years ago, hard really hit in our life. My husband had a cancer diagnosis and
Mm.
some other things going on. And it's amazing how that will tether you real quick, feeling untethered. And so the point is, if you go to my blog, there's probably 40 or 50 articles on there. But as you get through the first maybe 25 of them, you'll start noticing they're all faith based now. So I went from more of a self help to faith-based writing,
Uh-huh.
and I think that was God working through me and in me and through all the depth and the challenges and the struggles that I was going through. I think it brought out all of this in me, so I wasn't afraid anymore too to just talk about God, and I think I used to keep that very private. Oh, I love to talk about how I felt transformed in that part of my life, and, it's really, I think, how God was doing deeper work in me. And I think that's just what has happened over the last 4 years. So
Yeah. Yeah,
sure.
that sounds amazing. When you were just talking about the themes of the book and talking to kids, it makes me always think of like sometimes when you're trying to study something in the Bible and it's just not jiving. And it's so much easier if you can just go find something similar in a children's content, I feel like. Can I just start there and try to make sense of this before I read my big girl Bible? And yeah, what you're talking about, it's just like those are all lessons we all need to hear, right? And so the schools you go into, it's not always Christian schools, right? Even though it's a faith-based kind of content, but it doesn't have, it can be public schools and, different schools like that, right? And so you could easily adjust your message that way. And I was just thinking again, that's just such a cool way to reach people because they may not be ready to talk about their faith just yet. But before they are, they talk about these struggles and these things that they're going through in life and making it make sense for kids as well as adults. And I think that's so important to so that people do kind of listen to what you have to say about that makes sense to them before they can open their hearts and minds to maybe something a little bit deeper. So um,
That is
that's
so
so cool. I love that. That you're doing that with schools and stuff. That's so fun.
what I had no idea. And it's interesting because I have been to public schools. It's funny, but the admin there said to me, "Oh, unfortunately, I know you talk about through the spirit. We can't really do that here." And I said, "Oh, but can we talk about the 9 virtues of humanity?" And she goes, "Oh, yes." Fascinating to me how love, joy, peace, patience, goodness, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, self control can
Mhm.
be taught. These are attributes that I know I want my kids to be taught,
Mhm.
or what school you're in, right?
Right. Yeah.
I can, like you said, that was funny you picked up on that. I can adjust depending on what school. A lot of the little Christian preschools love me to come.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
They're you're walking in, there's all the fruit of the spirit everywhere, and it's so lovely. I also have a sprinkle of confetti devotional that's on the U version about one.
Uh-huh. Oh, yeah.
It's fun. Some of the schools will print that out, or it's a 10-day little plan, and it is
Uh-huh.
simple. There's a scripture, there's a reflection, there's a tiny little activity that anybody can do, and it's 10 minutes, and it's for
Mhm.
to do with their kids or maybe with your grands, if you have grandbabies. That all ties in pretty nicely, and it's just an ecosystem is what I call it because
Uh-huh.
it keeps evolving, which is
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah, that's incredible. Well, I want to ask you, so coming from writing for adults on your blog as well as now writing for children and stuff, I hear from a lot of women that have written messages for women. And now they're kind of going, can I maybe look at, modifying this for a children's book? So they're kind of thinking down that path, but then we keep hearing the resistance of it's so hard to break into the children's market, whatever that means, hard or, the market. I'm just curious, have you ever encountered any of that, or what do you have to share about that? Like how you got into that and, what you would encourage somebody else that's thinking about doing that with their message?
I'm telling you, I think the young Kirsten would have tried to fit a square peg in a circle hole,
Mhm.
been doing things and rushing things and trying to push things that were not going to work. And it took me 3.5 years. So I do
Mhm.
have to tell your audience these things don't happen overnight. Oh, I want to write
Yeah.
a book. When can I get it published? Can I have this all done in a year?
Uh-huh.
No. You're going to have the resilience and the perseverance too of being rejected. If I'm going to try it again, I think I'm going to try to pitch my story to this publishing company. Oh, do I want to do self publishing? How do I do that? Oh, do I want
Mhm.
traditional? What about hybrid? Okay. Um, I have to say that if it means enough to you and you have a heart to your message, be honest, be authentic, be intentional, be genuine, and get that into some type of form that
Uh-huh.
you've already written your book. So you're saying
Uh-huh.
audience that has a book already?
Yeah, yeah, has a book for adults, and now they're kinda like, "Well, maybe I wanna write a children's book." So, I mean, the children's book could be a separate topic, but it usually is
Yeah,
a spinoff of what you've already written for adults.
already gotten over the hump. You've already written
Mhm.
this book. So um, authors know that you got to have grit. My biggest obstacle was technology.
Mm.
Um, I nearly gave up on a lot of that. I had no idea that becoming an author is becoming an entrepreneur. This is like a
Yes.
business. I had no idea. Again, I was just a simple little blogger that decided to write a rhyme, and
Uh-huh.
it's a simple rhyme. Um, but what I did is I put it on a shelf, Kim, for about 2 years.
Mm.
I wrote this rhyme, I put it on a shelf, and then 2 years later, I was cleaning my bookshelf in my bedroom, and I took it out, and I read it again, and I even had attached an author's note to this, which was spread kindness like confetti, be good to yourself and to others, and how our differences make us stronger,
Uh,
the whole theme of the book. And I read it, and it's so interesting when you write something and then you read it years later, it's time travel. Read it, and then my husband read it, my 2 young adult children, and they said, "This is really good. You should try to get this published."
uh-huh.
Again, I just laughed because where do you start?
Yeah, yeah.
I literally asked Siri, "How do I publish a book?" So this is how basic. If I can do this, honestly,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
and Siri was telling me to do this, and I decided to pause and to pray, and I did nothing. So I wasn't trying to fit that little square in that circle and force things that weren't going to be unique and authentic. And I kept doing that, and months go by, and then all of a sudden, I decide that I have my illustrator right in front of me. She is a friend of 15 years. We worked together in elementary school for years. And I thought, why didn't I think of her? See, I wouldn't have thought of her if I hadn't have paused and prayed.
Yeah.
I thought, why wasn't she the first person I thought of? Because I was too busy Googling how to find
Mhm.
an illustrator. I was too busy getting stuck in my head with all this noise, trying
Yeah.
to theory, what do you do to find the perfect illustrator? And she was right in front of me.
Yeah.
Find an illustrator. I would recommend somebody trustworthy. There are a lot of people out there that unfortunately will say they're illustrators or maybe do 2 illustrations for you after you've paid them in full, and they don't exist suddenly anymore. So you have to be very careful with that. Um, Try to find a recommendation from a friend of a friend. In this case, it was a sweet friend of mine that sat down. I told her what I wanted to do, and she said, "I'm all in. Let's do it." So we spent a year together, meeting once a week, going over my vision. I had everything written out already, but it's really hard to put a illustration to your text to do that, and I didn't know that. But my advice to your audience too is you can always eliminate. If you start off wanting to be perfect, you'll never, ever write a book.
Yeah.
I rip out pages. I would X through that. I would say, why don't we flip that? Let's make Mochi smaller on this page and let's have her doing this instead. Why don't we make it a book that looks like it's a past, it's traveling? Oh, China, Japan, stamps. Okay, I get it. Why don't we educate and teach children about China, teach them about Japan, teach them about traveling? Okay, but do you see how this all slowly,
Uh-huh.
not
I
just
can so relate to this.
well, why don't we do this? I'm a person that loves to sit and I love to brainstorm.
Mhm.
So you start doing that. We did that for a year. And then I said, my blog is a confetti effect. I love confetti. I love bright colors. Let's
Uh-huh.
kindness like confetti. I want very bright colors. So we did yellows and pinks and oranges and greens. So it's happy and bright. And then I said, I want confetti spilling over on the pages, and some of the confetti are shaped in little cross shapes.
Uh-huh.
So just kind of show you little cross shaped confetti. With that said, I got my illustrator, I got my text, and how in the world am I going to find somebody to publish this book? I don't know how to self publish,
Uh-huh.
but I took a leap of faith and I went online and I started looking at different publishing companies. And I found this tiny publishing company out in Seattle. And the only reason I submitted a book proposal to them is because I loved the name. It was like Little Deep River. And that was their children's section. And I thought, that is so cute. A book proposal should not take anybody in your audience more than weeks. Took me 3 months because fear is going to paralyze you.
Uh-huh.
I mean, if you're like me, it's going to paralyze.
Yeah. Yeah.
Started procrastinating. I started letting fear paralyze me. And what happened is I spent 3 months on a book proposal, just telling them why I wrote the book, my
Uh-huh.
in the book, a resume, a picture of me. And finally, my husband hit submit. And I screamed. He said, you got it. You're going to submit this book. So you also need somebody in your life to correct you and adjust you and kind of say, hey, I think you're spinning. I think you
Uh-huh.
get off the wheel and just so he
Yeah.
book. And after the submission, a week later, Kim, I got an email from the publishing agent. And he said to me, thank you so much for submitting your book. And of course, I was like, no, it's a rejection. That's fine. He said, at this time, we are not accepting new authors. Of course not. And he said, we are trying to work on the authors we have currently. We're trying to market them better. We're trying to promote them better. However, I have a friend
Mm,
work at this publishing company and I find your book delightful and I would recommend it for publishing. What? And
that's awesome.
his friend on that email. So I thanked him and then I got involved with his friend. And then that's when the interview started and he wanted to know who I am. It's funny, a very important question. He had asked me if I had a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. And he said that the authors that are growth mindset and they're always learning and they're students, life learners, are the easiest type of authors they like to work with. And so I feel like I was like, "Oh, take my book and edit it, do whatever you
Yeah.
want
Oh,
with it."
yeah.
Well, we just like working with people that are kind of sunshiny and they
Uh,
like to learn. I said, "That's me."
yeah.
I feel like that's good advice for your audience
It
as well.
is. Yeah.
Life learner, to be a student, to have a great growth mindset, not a fixed mindset, a growth
Uh-huh.
mindset. And from that point on, I had no idea what I just jumped into the deep end. I'm not
Uh-huh.
person. I like to just slowly go down the stairs and go in the shallow end. But no, this was a deep dive. I thought the hardest part had been done because they said, don't call us, we'll call you. And 5 weeks later, they called me and said, congratulations. We do have a children's area in our publishing company, but we accept 11 to 15 of them a year. So, and of course, I was like, no, they'll never call me back.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Weeks later, they did, and that's how I started this journey. But then they were saying things like, you need to fill out, a 50-page questionnaire.
Uh-huh.
to really deep dive into your book, and where do you want your book sitting on book?
Uh-huh.
I don't know.
Yeah, there's a lot to think through, right? And luckily, you had somebody to partner with on that.
Right.
Um, yeah, I was thinking about what you were talking about with, like reaching out, like first, like your illustrator, because that is definitely one thing I hear about children's books, right? You got to find a good illustrator. But I think it's so important, like what you were saying, like you had somebody right there in front of you, and if you just ask somebody else that maybe has done a children's book or ask around, who do you know that is involved in that industry, so that you can get, the recommendations and not have to spend hours upon hours of, Googling, and then to be so generous, right? Like that first publisher that you submitted it to, they could have just said no, right? And for them to be so generous to say no, but not for us, but I have somebody to recommend to you. They saw that this is going to be an incredible book and they knew somebody that could do it justice. And that leads me into because I wanted to talk to you about PodMatch. And I was just thinking about that, just, generosity and recommending people. Like we loved that in the podcasting world, with our guests and things. So I want to ask you about that because you were also talking about somewhere where you touched on rejection. I was thinking about that with podcast guesting and then just modifying your topic, depending on the audience, which I think is super important. And that's what I love about PodMagic. It's in you in front of all these new audiences that you wouldn't reach otherwise. But I want to ask you about that. So how long have you been using the PodMatch service to connect with podcast hosts?
I started, as a matter of fact, my publisher, that was one of the things that this getting over my fear of talking so much because it's so unscripted. But
Uh-huh.
they told me back in November that it would be a good idea to get on PodMatch. And I was like,
Uh-huh.
what do I do? And I'm like, I can be self deprecating. I'm like, people are going to talk to me about my book. Why? And so they said, get on there and see how you do.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So I have to say, I really love it.
Yeah. Oh gosh. How did you so when did you become a member?
I think in November I did. And one thing I think is really important is making sure your profile. As you can imagine, I spent
Mm-hmm.
a book proposal. I
Mm-hmm.
spent probably 3 weeks on my dashboard. Is that what we call it?
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I spent a lot of time on my dashboard, which for your audience, I think there's a section, if I remember, they ask, what questions would you be willing to
Mm-hmm.
answer? And I really had to sit down. It helped me so much on,
Uh-huh.
okay, so I put a lot of time into that. Um, Pictures, all your socials, all of this. I put a lot of time into it. And I think that when you get on my profile, it'll give you a good idea of who I am. I think
Uh-huh.
you should really try to know you before they meet you because that might be the first and the last shot you get.
Yeah, it is. Yes, I haven't used PodMatch as a guest, but I've used it as a host, obviously, and that's where we connected. But yeah, I've been so surprised by sometimes the profiles are more like about me. Like I just want you to know about me, and on the host side, we're going no, no, no. We do want to know about you, but we first need to know about how you're going to serve our listeners. And so obviously I mean, I reached out to you and I saw your profile pop up. So you did a great job, yeah, with it. But I know I get a lot of messages that aren't a fit, and people should know that. If you're reaching out yourself, you see the profile of the podcast host. If you let PodMatch just do its magic, it matches people up, but it's not always a perfect match, But yeah, I would say that too. I think that's such a good point that, you got to spend some time on your profile. And luckily you just do it once, and you get it done, but then you can go edit it as much as you need to. So if somebody was thinking about venturing into podcast guesting or joining PodMatch, what advice would you say besides the profile?
Yes, the profile, number one. Number two, please be interested in your host. I always make a point of listening to 3 episodes before I even try to match with somebody.
Mhm.
They match with me. I want to know who you are. I want to listen to your voice. I want to see what kind of questions you ask. How do you do it? Is it more of a conversation?
Mhm.
So I will recommend always listening to 3 of the podcast host episodes.
Mhm.
And I do that. And then I want to put some time into writing a message. I can pitch my book. It's not like that. This is supposed to be more conversations. And so what I've noticed is this is like talking to an old friend in a coffee shop.
Uh-huh.
And that when I go on there, everybody has been so wonderful. Every single person, you are a delight. And it's just like kindness is displayed. and it's comfortable and casual and it's unscripted. We are not sitting here like we're in an interview
Right. Yeah.
job, just like, okay, now tell me this. Oh, thank you. Tell me this.
Mm-hmm.
Actually conversing and going back and forth.
Uh-huh.
Mm, You want things to be actionable too. You want tips and techniques and things that can really help your audience. And also, you have to have a mindset of how can I provide meaning and impact and value to your audience. So that's what I always try to go in with that mindset. And that's what I would definitely recommend for others. My mindset is, oh, I wrote a book on a tale of two dogs, a
Uh-huh.
children's kindness, but maybe I can talk about how to promote empathy in a world maybe that isn't always that kind, or how I
Yeah.
school system and talking to the children about the fruit of the spirit and
Mm-hmm.
building confidence and trust and things like that. So that's
Yeah.
my mindset is when I go on and book a pod match.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I've been in the podcasting industry for a while and, used to do PR and I used to pitch guest to host and that went really well and I loved it, and people loved that service. But I always felt like I was kind of getting in the middle of this relationship between the guest and the host, because it came through me first, which was so fun. I mean, I love getting to know all these hosts as well. But I'm like, no, this needs to be about you and the host because it's not just about your book. I mean, your book always gets mentioned no matter what. But there's just, yeah, so many fruit. I keep thinking of the word fruit now talking to you, but just so much fruit in that. Like you just never know what kind of connections can be made there. But if you just go in like, yeah, I'm just here to promote my book and I'm just here to, you ask me these questions, I'm going to answer them and then we're done. I'm moving on to the next one. Like that's not helpful for y'all. And it's not helpful for the listeners. So, yeah, I so appreciate you saying that and just having such a servant's heart. Oh gosh, well, Kirsten, this has been so good. I'm gonna make sure that I put all your links into your blog, into your book, and the show notes. And I just so appreciate it. This has been so fun, and like you were saying, you just never know what you're gonna talk about. Like I know there's a list of questions on there, but I have certain needs for my listeners and you've shown up and served really well. But like I was just thinking about, there's so many different offshoots you could go on, of the conversation. And so that's the other thing I was just gonna say about guesting, just being open to that, just being open to however God leads the conversation. I'm here for it. So anyway, I thank you so much for your time today. This has been so great. And I know my listeners are gonna love learning from you.
You're so welcome. And one quick thing too is I become friends with other podcast hosts. You become friends
Uh-huh.
recommending you and it's
Yes.
a community. So I'm loving this community.
Yeah, thank you for saying that because, yeah, I was thinking about that again when you were talking about, the publisher recommending you to a publisher. And I mean, it's so nice because people will reach out to me and be like, do you know anybody that talks about this topic? And I'm like, yeah, I know lots of people. Let me send you all their names because it's, we all want to do that for each other. So, yeah, I love that you're being able to do that in the PodMatch community because I have found that everybody is so generous and we're all after the same thing and just trying to serve people. So that's so fun. Okay, well, great. Thank you, Kirsten, so much. I'm so appreciative.
Thank you, Kim.
Oh, I hope Kirsten inspired you today in your writing journey, and I hope you'll check out her book and also PodMatch at the link below if you're wanting to guest to spread your message even further than you could possibly imagine. Thanks for tuning into Book Marketing Mania today, and as always, I'll be there for you next episode to help you reach and serve your readers one podcast at a time. See you then.